What's up, everyone? Kinetic Coach Dan here on Kinetic Konnections. We have some very special guests today. We're going to talk with a company called Advanced Muscle Mechanics and talk about a tool that they've created called the Launchpad, which is essentially a feedback-driven tool for making your bench press stronger, more effective, more efficient, and more importantly, more safe for your shoulders. It's a product that I discovered really sort of on accident at an event that I was visiting for the LA Fit Expo with another coach named Eric, the trainer. I happened to be at his facility. I crossed paths with these guys, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce Andrew Harvot and Brandon Copeland, aka the Midwest Kong. He's a legend in his own right as far as the bench press is concerned. Certainly has a much bigger bench press than my own, but I think that we all have a really great understanding of why it is this tool they've made is so important for evolving bench press training and shoulder health as it exists in the strength conditioning field and the sports performance field and the general fitness field. So Andrew and Brandon, thank you so much for joining me today. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourselves? Andrew, we'll start with you, and then Brandon, we can hear a little bit more about how you guys came to meet each other and how it's all gotten to this point where we're now all working together, because it's a very exciting time for me to be able to introduce this product. So Andrew, take it away.
As Dan said, my name is Andrew. I'm the owner and the creator of the Launchpad. I'm the owner of Advanced Muscle Mechanics and creator of the Launchpad. We'll get into the details on that and how I came up with that idea and where it's landed us ultimately. But I'm a former trainer myself, several years in the industry. And then I had the idea for the Launchpad. Decided to run with it. It was during the period of the pandemic, so it's been a journey. There's been some bumps and bruises along the way, but ultimately it's kind of landed me where I'm at right now, and with the opportunity to bring something special to the industry that I'm obviously very proud of, and it's introduced me to this big guy right here, Midwest Kong. We've got quite a story behind it. So I'm going to pass it over to him, let him introduce himself, tell a little bit about himself. Kong, take it away.
I'm glad that we cleared that up about who actually created the Launchpad, because Dan was making it very, very, very interesting on my behalf, because I didn't come up with it at all. I would have thought of nothing like that at all. I've destroyed my shoulders for over 20 years of lifting. So for me, it was simply just I was over bench pressing, and I come from a martial art background. I fought mixed martial arts for 11 years. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and a judo black belt, and competitor in both. I haven't competed in quite some time now, just due to getting healthier as I get older. I'm back on the mat though, but I've always been into lifting. I started personal training back in 2000, and every guy wants to bench. Most guys back then, before the social media, the deadlifting, and all of that heavy stuff was going on, we grew up on big bench presses, and I spent years of doing flat bench, and incline barbell press, and just between all the athletics that I've done, wrestling and all those things like that, I just pretty much destroyed my shoulder, and not having the knowledge of how to actually restore the joints and things like that. So I discovered the Launchpad a year ago now, and since then I've accidentally slipped into this world of being a bench presser. No disrespect to my buddies TD Smash, Julius Smash, the strongest bench presser in the world, but I just developed a style of bench pressing a lot of reps with heavier weight, and the way I was able to do that was using the Launchpad and developing my shoulder safety from that. So it's been quite some ride, and everybody's on this Zoom call is an accident. We didn't know we was going to meet Dan, and nor did I know I was going to be with Advanced Muscle Mechanic a year ago when I actually purchased the machine. So this is a pretty good story.
Yeah, I mean, that's really one of the most fun and enjoyable parts about this process for me is is that I've gone on this particular journey to go and actually actively seek guys like you out. So to have not found you myself, just in my searching process that I follow, and we can attribute some of that stuff to the actual Instaspheres algorithms and keeping us in our own little matrices. But I really consider you guys to have been this sort of moment of divine inspiration and intervention, because it was just such a random occurrence that I happened to meet you guys at Eric's gym. I think you guys, for some number of reasons, just happened to be there on a whim, just passing through, right? I mean, you guys were kind of like on a short schedule. You were running like chickens with your heads cut off as it is, and we just happened to cross paths.
I'm gonna tell you something, Dan. That's funny. Me and Andrew laugh about that all the time. So I met Eric in Columbus. Now, I don't know if he ever told you the story.
He told me the story. It's a pretty good one. Why don't you go ahead and encourage us a little bit with that strange story.
Say this. Eric's the biggest liar in the fitness industry. He makes everybody feel way cooler than they are. And I met Eric at the Arnold Classic. Me and Sam was there, and I was eating, and I was starving, and we literally just walked past the Subway booth. So I grabbed the food, dude, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I ran over to the garbage can, and I was smashing like a savage over the garbage can. I'm face in the garbage can eating, bro. Next thing you know, some dude taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around and he said, "Hey man, it take a lot of work to look that good, dude. You're a good-looking guy, man." And I'm like, I'm food all in my mouth and shit. I'm like, "Oh hey." He's like, "Hey, keep up the good work," and he walks off. And I knew he looked familiar. What I didn't realize is how big he actually is in person. So as I'm looking like, dang, that guy looks familiar. Me and Sam couldn't figure it out. I get home and Chef Rush shared a picture of me and him on his story. And as I'm going through his stories, I see Eric. Then it clicked who he was. So that's how I met him. He said I was a good-looking dude after eating a ton of Subway all over my face. That day we were there, me and him kept in contact. And me being a martial artist, he said that they was having the event. I was coming anyway to experience the LA Fit Expo and to do CT Fletcher's Iron Wars. And we came to go to the Museum of Martial Arts event. And when we went, I'm gonna be honest, I was ready to leave because I had eaten.
Yeah.
the all powerful force that is hunger, right?
Yeah, it was bad, man. And when I get hungry, dude, I'm close to 300 pounds. It wasn't good. So
don't make him hungry.
Like,
you wouldn't like him when he's hungry.
I'm sitting there. I'm like, you know what? Let's hang out a little bit, talk to Eric, and it was cool because we met a couple good people. And literally, when Andrew said, "Hey, man, we should get you something to eat," you walked in the door, and Eric come running up. He said, "Hey, I need you guys to meet him," and that's how it came about.
Yeah.
Wild. And I think if I remember correctly, Andrew, you and I had been just kind of hanging out, shooting the breeze a little bit at the martial arts event there, just chilling and chatting, and my family and my kids are there, and we're just kind of just all connecting in this really strange way of kind of all just enjoying martial arts. I mean, I know I loved martial arts as a kid, but my mom would never let me practice it because she was a number of reasons she didn't want me to be a part of it. So I just played football, and that's how I got into the strength and conditioning world. But to hear Kong coming from really the martial arts background, and then being thrust into this world of bench pressing just because he's such a physical specimen. How did you guys in particular meet and come across each other, Andrew?
So that's a very interesting story there. We're gonna have to go down the rabbit hole for this one. Okay, and I'm gonna try not to bash anybody, because I could, but I don't think that's professional. So initially, I when I brought the Launchpad, when I was trying to make my first attempt to bring exposure to it. Seeking out it's like, well, how can I do it most effectively for what I had to work with, as far as the budget was concerned and things of that nature. So logically, I'm thinking, well, okay, I'm going to find somebody that's in the industry that, people look to, that's, it's going to turn the head, and it has to be a big guy so that when he talks, everyone's going to pay attention, and they're going to, if he's that big, if he's a massive dude, then they're going to trust his word for, knowing what he's talking about, especially when it comes to weightlifting. So oddly enough, a mutual friend of mine knew a guy named.
That's not even say it. That's not even say it.
Well, I was gonna say there's a guy named Quick Mix Rick who used to DJ here in Dallas for one of the radio stations, and he knew a guy named Kevin the Hulk Washington, and so I started out by meeting him and essentially using him as my brand ambassador to try and get the word out, if you will. And a long story short, things went sideways, and ultimately we decided to part ways with them. But along the way, he Kong, and they had a little bit of we'll call it like an internet beef or whatever. And it was really just Kong wanted to challenge him to a bench off, if you will, at CT's gym. And so there was a whole event set up for that. And we ended up getting that rescheduled twice, I think, Kong.
No, it was once.
It was once. And so we were supposed to meet there, and that event was supposed to go down. Some things happened there. I'll let Colin get into that. And ultimately, later down the road, we, instead of it just being a competition and being done with it, we decided to come together and visit these gyms and do this entire campaigning, if you will, to bring exposure to the launch pad. We call it War of Worlds. And at the very end of it was when we decided to part ways with the Hulk and actually work with Kong, because he was actually better aligned with our vision, and we really liked him. I liked him actually from pretty much the start, from the very first time I started talking to him. He's from Ohio as well. He's also a Buckeye fan, so we are
yeah, a lot of good reasons to like each other, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's the fun part of this process again, is that you got to accept that people come and go, things come and go, opportunities come and go, and you got to really just hone in on what you align with best, right? And ultimately, you Andrew, you sort of stumbled into the launch pad, right? Or you had been researching this process for a long time, and now the opportunity arose for you to actually bring this thing to life. I mean, you're actually sitting in the place where it was developed, right? So, what does that process look like? I mean, if we want to be like really pure in this experience of, forgetting all the other mess of drama or whatever else that goes on in life, is we're talking about a tool that can legitimately help people's lives and legitimately improve their health, wellness, and sports performance across a wide range of fields. I mean, the bench press is arguably one of the most important cornerstone lifts for any strength conditioning program. What was that initial inspiration for you? And then what was that process of development like a little bit, if you can kind of give the bird's eye view of that?
Yeah, I'll try and give the 20,000 foot perspective. So I don't bore everybody with the juicy details. Like I was kind of explaining, because JL Holdsworth, when we met with him, he kind of asked me a similar questions, like, how'd you come up with this? What made you decide to create this thing, or what inspired it? And so I told him it was actually when I was still a trainer. It was during the pandemic. We're looking at probably roughly, and I misspoke when I told him a year ago. It took about a year for me to design it, and it's been about a year on the market. So when you do the math, it's actually back to about 2010, or not 2010, 2020. And so it's been roughly 2 years of actual from design and development to hitting the market and getting to where we're at today. So back to the question though, when I spoke with JL, and it's how I came up with it. I was actually I like to stay up on my knowledge of everything as far as biomechanics are concerned, the latest and greatest. I'm kind of a fitness nerd in that perspective. But so I was actually taking a class on exercise mechanics, biomechanics, and they were talking about the chest and the bench press actually specifically. And it, when they're discussing, the movement of the shoulder, yep, there's a launch pad right there. I've actually got one behind me too, and the original. I'm going to show you guys the actual original prototype. So they were talking about the shoulders and the movement of the upper arm, the humerus. It's supposed to move in rhythm with the shoulder blade or the scapula. So, and what actually happens on the bench is it gets jammed. And so it throws off that natural rhythm of the shoulder, and that causes problems. And it's actually responsible for more injuries in the gym than any other thing that's reported to date. So it just kind of a light bulb went off. And it was like, why all these years, all these improvements and not just machines, but pulleys and making improvements to adjust for the strength curve and everything like that. These plate loaded presses that you see prime.
The answer was literally under you the whole time.
Right. Why have we never addressed the actual surface that we lay on? And why do we have to be experts just to nail the bench press? That was the other thing. Most people don't have even the slightest clue how to set up correctly and execute correctly. So the immediate what if I could went off in my head is like, what if I could design something that will actually correct that problem and put people in position automatically to execute with precision and put them in prime position of press with the most power and improve the safety of it. So that's what kind of inspired it. And so I started, trial and tracking ideas. And I've actually had to get up and show you guys, but I've got the original prototype. I'm going to show you real quickly. Second.
And see, this is the beauty of this process, is what people don't really understand is that to take a product from concept in your mind to actually bring it to life. This is about as raw and real as it gets, as far as just throwing something together that you think might work. And then, it's a whole other beast to take this, what you're seeing on the screen right now, the original launch pad there, and turn it into something that you can at least produce on a somewhat mass scale, right? So explain that process a little bit, Andrew, and why it is the launch pad is designed the way you conceptualized it. It's actually quite close to the original design. Right. And you just brought that to life more with higher quality materials, with premium level, metals and rubbers and polymers. What was that process like for you?
The process of actually taking it.
Concept, yeah, from concept to manufacturing, essentially.
Oh, that was a headache in itself.
But, I bet.
Luckily, I had my engineer actually he laughed. Because when I brought him this, he's like, well, you did it backwards. I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, you're supposed to come to me first, and I'm supposed to help you design it. You're not supposed to spend, literally, I spent hours like molding this thing and doing, finding the exact angle. But almost a year just designing it. And when it's summer here in Texas and you're in your garage, it's hot. So it was miserable, but I was determined to nail it. And
you were going straight Tony Stark style in the middle of a cave, burning the candle on both ends just to get this thing to live, right?
I was out here like 7 a.m, and I'd be out here to like 1, 2 at night, or 7 a.m to 2 a.m. So I spent hours and hours and hours. And it was, I don't know, I was just determined. I didn't want to quit. And I knew I was so close. And there was always that one thing that I couldn't figure out. But back to that, getting it through manufacturing and everything. So that was an entirely different learning process. I had no manufacturing or supply chain background. So that was learn on the fly. That's an entire world that I learned about that I had no idea I knew existed, but I never had any desire to learn about until, this came about. And luckily, my engineer was a former, believe it or not, Russian Olympic powerlifter. So he knew exactly what I was going for when I showed him it. And he's like, and he knew it had to be tough. It had to be able to withstand the beating and rigors of training. I had to be able to withstand a lot of compression with the weight being on it. And so I didn't have to explain a lot to him because I had already, pretty much
Right.
it.
Well, I think that's the cool part, right? Is, that's why I love it, is that the design immediately told me what I was looking for and answered a question that I had been asking for a long time as well. And I'm sure Kong, I'm sure you can identify with this a little bit, is, we're people who are in the know about this, but the problem hasn't been solved, right? The tool hasn't been provided yet. So, Brandon, for you, what was that first experience for like you, if I can just go off on a tangent for a second here? What was that first experience like for you? Did you have that immediate aha moment like I did? I know the moment I saw it, I went, yes, that's what I've been looking for.
So I didn't do flat bench first.
Right.
I used it with incline dumbbells first. And for me personally, at that time, I didn't know the benefits of the shoulder health, right? At that time, all I knew is that I had trouble targeting the upper pecs with any incline or barbell bench. So when I did it on incline and I couldn't go as heavy as I normally would with the dumbbells, and then after I got off and I felt it, I was like, wow, that really targets, the upper pecs. So I knew it was
feedback was undeniable. Yeah.
Right. So I knew it was putting me in position to target the upper pecs. Now, after that is when I actually start delving into it and then speaking with Andrew on what it does. And me being a guy, I've never been a one press max guy anyway. So when I would do the reps, especially with 225, the first thing will go was my front delts. So I started using the machines. I didn't figure out a program on how to use the machines and train at the same time. So once I did that, I started to notice I don't feel my front delts at all. So now when I rep, the natural position that I put myself into from using a launch pad on a regular basis, I don't feel my front delts at all. So that's why my numbers went up. I was hitting for 225, I was hitting 60, 62, and then I went from that to 75. So not only does it protect the shoulders, it also was help with my shoulders being protected. It was helping develop my form better because I got a wide grip because of shoulder issues. And now I'm slowly starting to bring my arms in closer, which helps with the force and the power too. So it just overall, it was just like, damn, it worked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talk about it all the time, right? I mean, I know I preach it left and right. Sounds to me like you came more from that sort of raw, gritty world of jump into it, do the work, and get it done, regardless of what the consequences are, right? Which is very much of like a traditional athlete mentality. Like, I'm not going to let anything stop me. I'm going to use sheer willpower if I have to, even if my shoulder explodes in the process. But, a lot of the world that I work in and deal with is, people who absolutely under no circumstances ever want to get hurt. They don't even want to be uncomfortable in the process of training. So, how do we make that process more intuitive? And we say it all the time, right? Position precedes performance, right? And unfortunately, no one bothered to look at the actual bench itself in saying that all these years, except, fortunately for us, Andrew, in that in that invention of his and in that sort of, creative and evolutionary process for himself. So, I know for a fact, the moment I saw it laying on the bench there, I went, oh, that's it, right? That clicked right away. I said, this is going to be something that caters to not only high performance athletes who already understand how to be in that position, but more importantly, I would say there's a much, much, much larger subsect of the population that are people who need to be able to lay on a bench and understand how to feel that position and feel that connection with the right muscles at the right time through the kinetic chain immediately, because they already have shoulder injuries from doing nothing. and being incredibly weak? How do we get them past that point of weakness and get them to that point of strength and performance as quickly and efficiently as possible? That's really what the Launchpad fed for me. So it's so interesting to see how you can have these sort of completely different opposite ends of the spectrum as far as strength, performance, therapeutic, rehabilitative training, prehabilitative training, and how those worlds just perfectly meet on this guy right here, and that's something that I want to make sure that people see. Is you saw the prototype version of the Launchpad that Andrew was showing here, but here's the finalized version. And I mean, that was really one of the other things that I saw right away is just how polished the product was. And I think I might say that Andrew probably has a little bit of OCD tendencies for sure, because this thing is about as close to perfect as I've seen in product development on like first runs of production, right? I mean, Andrew, this is the first run of production, one of the models that I have here. Very, very few products that I see come out ready to rock and roll right away. So again, well, let's go back now, Andrew, to that creative process for you, and now actually going through the practical struggles of making this thing come to life from Frankenstein's monster to now let's call it high performance, high octane machine.
Sure. So one of the struggles, the biggest struggle was finding. So you have to look at a flat bench and try and envision the way your shoulders move, but backwards, like you're looking at it from. I guess if you were to lay on the ground and look at your shoulders moving from underneath the bench, I guess would be the best way to describe that. You would see that it creates that angle that you're seeing with the Launchpad there, with the angle of the panels. And so what I designed that to do was mock basically what the body does naturally. So with the traditional bench, the flat surface is jamming that shoulder blade. And so when your upper arm, the humerus comes down, your shoulder blade is now sliding around the rib cage as it's supposed to do. It's getting jammed, and you're putting a tremendous amount of force on your shoulder joint. So as demonstrated right here, see his upper arm comes down, and his shoulder blade will actually stop moving once it hits the bench.
So I can tell you right out of the gate, and now to be fair, I'm only using 135 pounds here, and I'm using a Kabuki strength Cadillac bar. So regardless of how my hands are positioned on the bar and the type of weight, just the pliability of the bench press surface, you can always feel that your shoulder blades are somewhat stuck, right? And maybe there's not a price to pay for that right now, but compound that over thousands and thousands of reps over hundreds of actual training sessions, and pushing higher and higher and pushing the envelope harder and harder on that training, is that inability to move that shoulder blade just because of the pliability of that surface there. And depending on how wide or narrow or what have you the actual pad is, that makes such a difference to have the Launchpad now, where I can adjust the positioning of that instantly, right? And that's just such a beautiful thing, because the average person can lay on this thing and actually feel it right away and understand that the shoulder blades can move properly. So again, continue down that rabbit hole for me.
Sure, yeah. And so like Dan was saying, on the eccentric, on the downward portion of the reps execution, your shoulder blade is supposed to, instead of sliding around the rib cage and accommodating that force that's being put on the upper arm and the shoulder joint, it gets stuck. So it actually exacerbates the amount of force that's put directly on the joint itself, and it causes over time major problems. And then that isn't accounting for the concentric portion of the rep. So on the flip side, when you're going up on the rep on a bench press, when your arms are actually, when you're extending up to lockout, your shoulder blade is actually supposed to move back around your ribs and slide and allow your shoulders to protract slightly, so that you're actually getting a full rep. So you not only are putting a tremendous amount of force on your shoulder joint that is not designed to handle, you're also not getting a full repetition with a flat bench. So there's more than one problem associated with it. The biggest being and the other part is that you're not able to actually train the muscle through its entire contractile range effectively. So that was the major thing. Besides all the technique that's involved with trying to quote unquote execute properly, or what's known as proper execution, which you'll see in the powerlifting community where they tuck their shoulder blades and they're arching their back to a ridiculous extent, I might point, but there's a reason they do that. So the other element I wanted to add in designing this was, how can I design something that's going to put people right in the correct positions, that there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're going to execute properly because it actually forces them. So they're arching your back. There is a reason to do it. And the reason for that is it actually lines up your sternal angle. So your sternum on your chest, where it connects to your rib cage, and when it's pointed more vertically, your chest fibers are more lined up against the line of force. So you're recruiting more of your chest, and it actually makes you stronger. So that's why powerlifters actually do that. But they also do it to help tuck their shoulders back, because that's what they've been taught. And yes, when you actually press from your shoulder blades, that's your strong pressing position, but it's supposed to be naturally. So when you're coming back, automatically creates that shelf that they're trying to artificially create by, the very high arch and tucking their shoulders. So I wanted to take into consideration all of those techniques and tricks that people learn, from years and years of practice and being coached, and put it into a piece of equipment that would ultimately just take away the learning curve, and not only that, but improve shoulder health. So even your press, just like your most experienced powerlifters, the most experienced athletes have been coached through proper execution and know all the ins and outs of how to get the most out of their bench press. So there was more than one thing that I put into this design, and obviously want to level the playing field.
Yeah, well, I mean, Brandon said it right out of the gate, right? He had been benching for a while now, working on the high volume, high resistance level, rep based work. And, I guess in sports in general, there's always that sort of assumed level of risk and assumed sacrifice involved, that you say, okay, well, I want to perform at the highest level amongst the elite, right? And I just have to accept that part of that process is there's a greater risk and potential for injury. And there's, and obviously the higher the risk in many ways, the higher the reward. But, at the same time, we also have to accept that as part of training, we have to put our ego aside in many ways. And just like Brandon said, Brandon, you said right out of the gate, you realized you couldn't even do anywhere near as much or work with anywhere near as much weight as you normally do, just because of the alteration that had been made to your mechanics. And your body had for so long compensated by using more of your anterior delts and really the weaker muscles in the area that shouldn't be overworking, or at very least they should all be working together in this kinematic sequence. And we talk about that a lot, is the importance of fascial integration through the entire joint articulation. And already in a bench press, our hands can't and our forearms can't rotate, right? So that takes away some of that aspect of the kinematic sequence that's really important for something like martial arts, where you're punching and you're trying to produce force quickly, right? So something like the launch pad, Brandon, what was that like for you, being a guy who's already really well established as a bench presser, to go, okay, you know what, I'm going to be smart here, I'm going to back off on my ego, and I'm going to focus on training with this thing for a little while and see where it takes me?
See, the thing with me is I was the complete opposite. I have more ego in fighting chokes and jiu-jitsu than I did on the bench, because, like I said, being a quote unquote bench pressure that necessarily wasn't my thing. So my ego was only in the martial art aspect of it. Oh, don't want to. This is not choking me, or I can survive this choking. Then next thing you know, they're waking me up. When I first started jiu-jitsu, that's where the ego was. It took me 2 years to learn that quickly. In bench pressing, though, it was no ego. It's never been that at all. I actually wasn't benching. I started my YouTube channel. Actually, it'd be 2 years Saturday. And even in there, I would always say, like, I bench probably once a month, if that. And that's because of the shoulder health. I never had a serious injury, never had surgery, but I got to the point to where it was so much wear and tear build up that it just wasn't comfortable bench pressing anymore with the barbell. It had to be a really good day. And then another thing is, a lot of people didn't realize that I was also, pushing 40. Now I'm 42, but so people didn't realize that was the case either. And when I got the launch pad, and what it did, what's interesting about the launch pad though, is I remember I could only do 100-pound incline dumbbell press with the launch pad. So what's interesting about the launch pad is where the over time the strength comes, because when I use it on flat bench, 315 was about my peak of getting about 6 to 8 reps. Without the launch pad, I've hit 315 for 37. So it was like my peak. I can get about probably 10, 12 good ones before that launch pad started letting you know, like, hey, dude, you're doing this. This is all launch pad and your body is locked in. This is how it's supposed to be done. And it was tough. But now and over time, I was able to, do 405 with the launch pad for 5 or 6 to 8 reps, and use the launch pad in a training method. Like one of my training for when I'm getting ready to rep, I'll do a day with the launch pad with the weight that I'm trying to rep. Like, for example, I'll do 315, I'll do a set of 10 with the launch pad, then take a minute break, then do a set of 15, then do a set of 20. And it's just crazy how when I first got it, that wasn't happening at all. So the launch pad still does also not only protect, make you do the right things, it also over time gradually builds strength too.
Mm-hmm. And I want to add something to that. So that one of the things that you'll notice, and because I've had people ask me a lot of times, like, why is it that why am I weaker with the launch pad? And it's not that you're actually weaker; it's that you're having to engage your muscles in a different way. You actually have to engage more of your stability structure in your shoulder, which you weren't having to do on a flat bench because your shoulder blade wasn't able to move the way it was supposed to. So you're engaging your shoulders correctly instead of incorrect.
It's artificial stabilization, right? Through the structure that you're laying on, not through the body. And that's really the difference, right? Is the launch pad's giving feedback and stimulus in a totally different way, which in many ways is its own version of progressive overload, which is why you see that enhanced training effect over time. And suddenly when you go back to having that artificial stability of the bench itself, say you're a competitor who trains on the launch pad consistently, but then competes on the flat bench with a straight bar, now you have that much better performance, but reduced risk of injury, right? Which is why we use any modality the way we do in the gym.
Exactly. And, you want to force the body to adapt too. So you want to challenge it in ways that it's not used to. And that launch pad certainly does that. One of the other things too is that you have to take into consideration now as compared to that of what camber bars do, and that it extends the range of motion of the exercise. So because your shoulder blades are able to actually protract and retract the way that they're supposed to do naturally, you're actually getting a much longer range of motion and a much deeper stretch of the chest fibers that you would do that you wouldn't be getting on your traditional flat surface. So I always say, think of it as maybe a rep and possibly even as much as a additional third rep. So like you're doing almost a rep and a third per rep every time that you hit it, just one single rep on the launch pad versus, traditional bench. So that equates to quite a bit of volume over time. And when you consider the improvements in endurance and how, power and force is produced through the muscles, that that additional stretch allows you to actually efficiently utilize the stretch shortening cycle. So you're producing more power out of the hole. Oh, I can't, we can't hear you, Dan, I don't think. Lost there you go.
So here you go, right? We're on the incline angle. I'm at the 30-degree incline. I'm using a cambered bar. I've got the launch pad set up, and you can feel every bit of that, right? And I'm pretty strong. I'm not a super strong bench guy, and I don't really bench press frequently. So for me, this is all about getting that fascial integration and being able to create that longer stretch and shortening cycle. I use a lot of eccentrics, isometrics, and full range of motion, because so many of the people that I train just require functionality and a little bit of enhanced strength, right? Or they need to develop, their chest, shoulders, back, and entire thoracic complex all together, because there's someone who sits a lot, there's someone who's on a bicycle a lot. And we want to build that nice variety of strength and much more comprehensive daily movement library, right? So I'm not trying to create champion bench pressers out here. Even most of the athletes that I train don't really need bench press. I train a lot of baseball, right?
Baseball.
And for me, something like the launch pad now suddenly kicks the door down for better bench press performance in baseball players if you're willing to use something like dumbbells or a cambered bar, like the Kabuki strength bar here, the Cadillac bar. So, where for so long, and for good reason, baseball, what do you hear from baseball coaches all the time? Do not bench press. Do not bench press, right? That wagging the finger, or throwers, right? Throwers of any kind, right? We don't need to be doing any bench press, right? Sure you do, right? Your shoulder needs to be strong, but you're not wrong in the idea that the bench itself is problematic. So how do we modify? How do we get out of that mindset of being prohibitive in certain movements? The launch pad does actually much more than bench press, right? I find it's incredibly beneficial for my back and posterior delt and rotator cuff work when I'm laying in the opposite direction, right? So when I'm here, now suddenly I've got much more ability
and
to work through that range of motion,
And I'm going to add to that, Dan, if you don't mind. So if you go back to the launch pad there, if you see that downward sloping surface atop the launch pad, is designed specifically to place your chin. So I integrated that because each surface you lay on, you can lay on your stomach or on your back. If you're laying prone, like Dan's doing right now, actually, am I getting that wrong? Prone. It's early. Anyways, laying on your stomach. What I actually wanted it to do is actually force you to do pulling exercises correctly too. So when you initiate a pull, correctly execute. The most seasoned lifters will tell you, and strength coaches, is you actually want to initiate with a slight protraction of your shoulders. So before you pull, so that way it puts tension on the working muscle and allows you to engage it through its entire range. So the actual angled paneling there forces your shoulders forward, so into slight protraction when you're laying on your stomach. So it was multi-purpose. There's more than one purpose for its design, and I wanted it to be functional for, obviously I recognized that very quickly that bench both for move and or any pulling exercise that you're laying prone's correct. Now I had about it. But yeah, there's more than one design element there that went into. I wanted it to be multifunctional too, not just for the bench press, because there's so many different exercises that do involve a bench from different angles and whatnot. So
Well, I mean, that's really the beauty of it, right? Is it is it's an all-encompassing tool for improving your thoracic complex, and ultimately the bench press is a part of that. Shoulder health in general is a part of that. If you want to be a better bencher, you're going to have to be doing plenty of that pulling work, that posterior delt work, that rotator cuff work, your rhomboid work, your lower traps, your upper traps, your lats, right? In fact, I would argue that you need to be doing 3 to 4 times as much of that stuff as your bench press work. That's going to drastically improve your strength.
Right. I agree. They always say big back, big bench for a reason, right? So, that's the surface from which you press off of and develop your power. So, they say it for a reason. I think Kong will also tell you that we've noticed that there's even more use. I mean, I can go off pretty much every muscle group that it can be used for, which we actually, when I brought it to, as I was bringing it to market, we kind of stumbled across the discovery that it can be used for legs very effectively, especially leg extensions and leg press, where on a leg extension, people struggle with, their butt coming out of the seat. It plants you because of it almost updates the ergonomics of the machine. So that immediately has a difference in the amount of power that you're able to produce through your legs. So you need to have a stable pelvis to execute, leg extensions correctly.
Right. Well, I mean, how important is it that your upper body, your shoulders, your spine, your upper spine, your middle back are strong during your squat and your deadlift? Hello, it makes perfect sense.
And posture almost on every exercise. Everything relates to posture and form, and if you can nail the posture, your form, your body almost takes over in executing with correct form. So that's why I always say most people don't even have a clue on how to set up and stabilize correctly. And I wanted to give the industry a tool that you can put it on pretty much anything, and it will set you up in the correct position, and it will ensure that you're stable with upper body, and it will ensure that essentially your central nervous system takes over, and you basically will execute almost correctly by instinct, if you will, because it's just how the body works. Put yourself in the right position. You're more than
Absolutely. Well, I think that the launch pad is certainly the right tool for that. It's mobile, it's deployable, it's efficient, it's effective. It checks all of my boxes for something that's an important critical evolution in bench press training, shoulder health training in general. So Andrew, where do we find you guys? I'm going to make sure that you guys are tagged up and all this stuff, that the websites are available, but why don't you go ahead and tell us what the website is, where they can actually purchase the launch pad.
Sure. You can look at Dan's shirt there and you'll see Advanced Muscle Mechanics. That's the name of that company. You can.
By the way, I really like you guys because I hate the color red. I'm colorblind and it's apparently much brighter than I originally thought. So I'll wear a red shirt for you guys.
You're taking one for the team, Dan. So you can find us at www.advancedmusclemechanics.com. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, or even Instagram, just Advanced Muscle Mechanics all together, or Advanced Muscle Mechanics LLC on YouTube, just Advanced Muscle Mechanics on Facebook. So we're on all platforms, even on TikTok, even though I'm getting started on that. I don't know how I feel about it, but we're getting there.
And Brandon, where can everyone find you? Of course, like I said, we're going to make sure that everybody can certainly find you through Instagram and all that stuff. But what's your website or your information in general?
Midwest _ Kong on Instagram, Midwest Kong on TikTok. Like Andrew said, I'm also, fairly new to it, trying it out. And Midwest Kong on YouTube. So I don't do Facebook. I'm new to this, man. I'm only going on 2 years, man. So people got to bear with me. I'm gonna get it together. I do all my own editing and stuff, so it's a tough road. But those 3 platforms, I'm definitely on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, gentlemen, Andrew, Brandon, thank you guys so much for joining me today. Everyone, there's a lot of exciting stuff that's going to be happening around the Launchpad here. So make sure you're paying attention and staying tuned. We'll see you out there next time, y'all, here on Kinetic Konnections. Live kinetically, y'all.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good one, guys.
All right, you too, man.